to dare to stop reading Elizabeth's story like it's just another "God finally did it" testimony. Because before the miracle, there was a woman getting older every year in a culture where people quietly measured a woman's worth by whether she could become a mother. And I keep thinking about how many Sabbaths she probably sat through, smiling, serving, praying, while carrying the kind of disappointment nobody really knows how to talk about out loud. Luke 1 feels very different when you slow down enough to notice that part. Luke 1 feels very different when you slow down enough to notice that part. Because I don't think Elizabeth's story was meant to be read this quickly. Sometimes I wonder what it felt like for her when the room got quiet after conversations about children, or when people asked certain questions a little too carefully. You know those questions where people are trying to sound kind, but you can still hear the curiosity underneath it? And the hard part is, in that culture, women carried most of the blame for infertility. So even if nobody said anything directly, and I'm sure some people did, it was still there. The looks, the assumptions, that feeling of your life slowly becoming the thing people pity you for. And Luke does something really interesting here, because before he even tells us about the miracle, he makes sure we know Elizabeth and Zechariah were righteous before God. I keep coming back to that, because it means her suffering wasn't proof God was disappointed in her. And I think a lot of women need that reminder more than people realize. Especially women who have prayed for something for so long that they don't even pray about it the same anymore. The prayer changes after a while. At first it's hopeful, then eventually it becomes quieter, more careful. You stop bringing it up as much, because disappointment is exhausting when it stretches over years. And meanwhile, life keeps moving around you. People announce engagements, pregnancies, new chapters, answered prayers. And you're trying to stay faithful without secretly wondering if God skipped over your name somehow. That's why I don't think Elizabeth's pain was only about not having a child. I think it was also about carrying unanswered hope in public. And maybe that's why this story feels uncomfortable when you actually stay with it for a minute instead of rushing to the ending. Because Luke introduces Elizabeth already carrying the disappointment. We meet her in the middle of it, not after God fixes it. I don't know, there's something very human about that. You can almost imagine how their life had probably settled into routine by then. Zechariah serving in the temple, Elizabeth managing ordinary days the way people do when life hasn't turned out the way they thought it would. And after enough years pass, people stop asking certain questions directly, at least to your face. But that doesn't mean you stop feeling them, especially in a culture like theirs. Back then, infertility followed women socially. People attached meaning to it. If a woman couldn't have children, others often assumed something spiritual had gone wrong somewhere. Maybe God was withholding favor. Maybe there was hidden sin. Even if nobody said it openly every single time, Elizabeth would have known how people thought. That kind of thing changes the way you move through a room after a while. And Luke, this is what I find interesting, Luke makes sure to tell us they were righteous before he ever tells us about the miracle. Almost like he knows readers are going to look for a reason she's suffering. I keep thinking about that detail more than the miracle sometimes, because I've seen how quickly people turn unanswered prayers into suspicion, especially when it comes to women. If life delays too long, suddenly everybody becomes a quiet investigator trying to figure out what went wrong. And meanwhile, Elizabeth is still living her life. Still waking up every morning, still going to gatherings probably, still hearing conversations about children and family and legacy and all the things that would have touched the sorest part of her life, whether people realized it or not. I wonder if there were moments she stopped expecting anything to change, not because she stopped believing in God completely, but because disappointment can wear a person down emotionally in ways that are hard to explain, unless you've lived through something long enough yourself. The prayer itself changes eventually. At first, you pray with urgency. Then later, I don't know, sometimes people become quieter with God, more cautious, like they're trying to not get their hopes up again. And the painful part is, from the outside, faithful people can still look perfectly okay while carrying all of that internally. That's what makes Elizabeth's story feel so real to me. Luke doesn't introduce her as a symbol first. He introduces her as a woman already living with years of silence before heaven finally answered anything. And maybe that's why I've never been able to read this chapter as just a story about a miracle birth. The waiting is all over this passage. You can feel it sitting underneath everything, even when nobody's directly talking about it. Like, Luke mentions that Zechariah was serving in the temple when the angel appeared, and for some reason that detail always gets me a little, because it means life was still moving normally while all of this unresolved pain existed in the background. He was still working, still showing up. Elizabeth was still waking up to the same reality every morning too. I don't know why, but I think sometimes we imagine people in the Bible living in this constant dramatic awareness of what God is doing, but most of their lives probably felt ordinary while they were inside it. And actually, this part always stands out to me too. Luke makes sure to say they were righteous before God almost immediately, before the miracle, before the angel, before any of it, which probably says something about people even back then. Because why include that detail unless Luke already knows readers might quietly assume their suffering meant something was wrong spiritually? People still do that now. Not always out loud, but you can feel it sometimes around certain kinds of waiting, especially for women. If enough time passes, without marriage, without children, without some visible answer, people start solving your life like it's a mystery with a hidden reason behind it. Meanwhile, you're just living through it, trying to stay soft, trying to not become bitter, trying to pray without overthinking every silence afterward. And then Elizabeth finally conceives, and the first thing she talks about is reproach, the shame she carried among people. That part hurts a little every time I read it, because it means the wound was never only private. Other people had been inside her pain too. And maybe that's part of why this story still reaches people so deeply now, even though most women listening aren't dealing with infertility specifically. It's something wider than that. It's the feeling of living with a disappointment that slowly becomes visible to other people, whether you want it to or not. I kept thinking about that line where Elizabeth talks about her reproach being taken away. I used to read past it quickly, honestly, but the older I get, the more I realize people can survive hard things privately a lot easier than they can survive being quietly defined by those hard things in public. That changes people a little, sometimes in small ways you barely notice at first. You start rehearsing answers before conversations. You brace yourself before certain gatherings. You pretend certain comments didn't sting as much as they did. And eventually, you get tired of explaining your life to people who only understand blessing when they can see evidence of it immediately. I think women especially understand that pressure, not even just spiritually, socially too. There's this unspoken timeline people carry around for women. Marriage by a certain age, children by a certain age, stability, direction, some visible sign that life is moving forward properly. And when your life doesn't line up neatly with those expectations, people may not always judge you directly, but sometimes you can still feel yourself becoming the conversation after you leave the room. Or maybe not the conversation exactly, just the concern. That kind of thing sits with a person, And I don't think Elizabeth was untouched by any of that emotionally just because she loved God. Actually, Luke saying she was righteous before God almost makes the story sadder for a moment when you think about it, because it means this wasn't happening because she failed spiritually somewhere. There wasn't some hidden punishment sitting behind her infertility the way people probably assumed. She was faithful and still waiting. Which, honestly, is a harder kind of story for people to sit with, because we like explanations for suffering. We want life to feel predictable. If someone is hurting, we want to know why. If somebody's prayers remain unanswered for years, we want there to be a reason that makes us feel safer somehow. But Luke doesn't really give us that. He just gives us two aging people who loved God and were still carrying disappointment deep into their later years. And maybe that's why this chapter feels so personal to so many women now, because there are prayers people stop mentioning publicly long before they stop carrying them privately. I don't think Elizabeth stopped feeling the weight of it every day. I just think she learned how to live while carrying it. And that part of Elizabeth's story feels painfully modern to me, even though the world she lived in looked completely different from ours. Because a lot of women are doing that right now, learning how to keep functioning while carrying something heavy underneath their everyday life. Sometimes it's the ache of wanting marriage and feeling embarrassed that you still don't have the relationship everyone assumed would have happened by now. Sometimes it's wanting children. Sometimes it's staying in a job that drains you while trying to act grateful because at least you have work. Sometimes it's praying for healing and getting tired of hearing people reduce your pain to inspirational one-liners. You learn how to answer questions without answering them fully. You learn how to smile through conversations you secretly want to leave. You learn how to celebrate people while also going home feeling the weight of your own unanswered life. And after enough time passes, people get uncomfortable with your waiting. That's something I don't think we talk about enough. At first, people are compassionate. They check in, they encourage you, but when years go by and nothing visibly changes, support sometimes turns into confusion or distance, or advice nobody asked for. Eventually, some people stop sitting with your pain and start trying to explain it instead. I think that's why Elizabeth's story matters so much, beyond the miracle itself, because Luke forces us to see a woman who was loved by God before her life looked resolved, before the public evidence, before the answered prayer, before the moment people could finally point at her life and say, "See, God came through." And honestly, I think a lot of people accidentally measure their worth that way now, by visible outcomes. Am I married yet? Am I successful yet? Did my life finally turn around yet? Do I finally have a testimony people will celebrate? But Elizabeth's story sits in tension with all of that, because for most of the chapter, nothing changes externally. She's still waiting, still aging, still carrying the same silent grief. And yet, Luke still describes her as righteous before God in the middle of that unresolved season, not after it. That changes the way I read this story now, because maybe the deeper message was never that God finally loved Elizabeth enough to answer her prayer. Maybe he had been with her the entire time, even during the years nobody else knew what to do with her pain. I don't know. There's something about Elizabeth's story that stays with me after the chapter ends. Maybe because a lot of people know what it feels like to quietly carry a life that hasn't happened the way they thought it would by now. That feeling when somebody asks a simple question and you answer it quickly because you don't want your face to change in the middle of the conversation. Or when you clap for somebody else's good news and then sit in silence afterward because their happiness accidentally touched the sore part of your own life again.
I think Elizabeth knew that feeling very well. And the next part of her story, the way she finally speaks after all those years, it reveals something about pain and shame and being seen by God that most people completely miss when they read Luke 1. We're going to talk about that in the next video. But before you leave, tell me something honestly, not spiritually polished, just real. What part of waiting has been the hardest for you lately?